Welcome to RTB 101. This is the segment where we talk about practical questions to help you share your faith with your friends and family more effectively. I'm here today with Dr. Jeff Swearing. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Krista. It's good to be here today.
Now, reasons to believe we love scientists, but I can tell you as a non-scientist over here, they kind of seem to have their own language. And so I'm really glad you're here to help us as the physicist to help me bridge that gap. Because when I think about this, I think about scientists speak the language of evidence and testing and facts. And me as a Christian, I tend to speak the language of faith and morals and God. And so how do I begin to put those two things together for my science-minded friends?
Well, I think one of the crucial things to recognize in there is that it's a language difference, but there's really no fundamental difference, because both of what scientists are doing and what Christians are doing is we're wanting to know what's the truth and how do we believe that. And so one of the things we do at RTB is we've developed this testable creation model strategy that takes what we're trying to do in Christianity and puts it in the language that a scientist can understand.
So tell me a little bit more about that language and the creation model strategy. How does that help me bridge the gap to the scientists in my life?
Well, one way that plays out is that what we do is we look in Scripture and we think Scripture tells us things that actually happened. And then we ask the question, what would that look like as we're going out and investigating creation? So when you're looking at Genesis 1, you say, all right, if this is what happened, what would we expect to find as we go out and look at the scientific record? So we develop a model or an explanation that we can then go test and see whether that's right or wrong.
Okay, so maybe a couple of examples that are coming to my mind about that is the idea of the first humans were sort of in the Middle East, North Africa area. So that's kind of a testable idea. Whereas if science then tells me first humans were in North America, that's going to be a big problem.
Exactly right. And you've recognized some of the problem there is that the Scripture doesn't come out and say, oh, Adam and Eve lived X, Y, and Z. So there's it's not specific language in there, but there's definitely things that if you were to change this about what the Bible said or about what Christianity has to say, you're going to get something very different. And so those are the sorts of ideas that have very testable consequences. And the reason why that testing is important is that's the language a scientist use to figure out what's right.
So let me ask you this. Isn't testing, though, and this whole idea of testability, applying that to Scripture, that seems kind of a worldly way of thinking. Help me understand that.
It does kind of seem that way, but when you look at what people in the Bible did and what the Bible admonishes us to do, is we're supposed to go look at what's written. For example, the Bereans. Paul commended them, not just for listening to what he had to say and having faith. He commended them for testing what he was saying against the Scriptures to make sure it was correct. Thessalonians tells us to test everything and hold on to the good. So we're, as Christians, as we're looking to figure out what does the Bible say, we're using this process. This says this Scripture says this. How do we work together? Well, if that's true, how do we reconcile this? That's the testing process. It's just not the language we use as Christians, but it's very much a part of understanding Christianity well.
Okay. So then maybe help me appreciate, as a non-scientist, why this approach is helpful in sharing the gospel. Like, what kind of fruit have you seen when you've used this testable creation model strategy?
Well, one just real quick example. I was at a conference and asked a question, when might you be able to test between this and a more Christian view of things? And that prompted a whole discussion amongst the people I was around of, I've never thought about how to test Christianity. That idea, just testing things, that instead of just saying, well, Christianity says this, you got to believe it, of here's what it would be, here's how you might test it, that opened up a whole conversation about what does Christianity have to say and this and that and the other. We had just very fruitful conversation. And so that idea of testing is very important to scientists, and it's a tool that we can use to engage their language and their culture.
Okay. So if I'm not a scientist, what could I do? Practically speaking, I'm in that moment with a science-oriented friend. What's a practical step I could do if I can't get into all the nuts and bolts of the testable creation model strategy, what could I do?
Well, I think first is all just asking some questions, trying to figure out what people have to say, what's important to them, because that'll, as you understand Christianity more, that'll help you identify where they're saying things that fit with Christianity and where they don't, kind of helping them test it. Also, I think just recognizing that Reasons to Believe's got a lot of resources. We've got books, we've got websites, web articles, podcasts that you can do to equip yourself and to share with others, even if you can't understand all of the scientific detail.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for helping us out with that. I think you gave us some really good practical tips. Jeff Swearink, everyone, be sure to follow him on Facebook and Twitter.